for April 7th to order. Let me remind everyone, if you are to speak tonight, to please sign in on the clipboard. Make sure the microphone's turned on and speak clearly into it. Our next planning board meeting will be April 21st at 7:30 p.m. in the Matthew Thornton room, which is this room. The next bike and pedestrian subcommittee meeting will be April 28th at 7:30 p.m. also in this room. The bike pedestrian members will be presenting at the April 23rd town council meeting as well. Let me designate Nelson to sit in for the vacant planning board member's position. I see that Lynn has arrived. That brings us to item 2 on our agenda, which is the Planning and Zoning Administrator's Report.
Thanks, Bob. I have 2 items. The first is that the new planning board alternate member will be appointed on Thursday at the April 9th town council meeting this week. And secondly, we have 2 regional impact determinations to make. The first one is Button Homes LLC and Donna Kazmerchuk, which is on our agenda tonight. This is a project that proposes to subdivide a 2.28 acre parcel into 2 residential lots. And in addition, on a future agenda, Anheuser-Busch LLC will be in for a project that proposes an additional 50,000 square feet of warehousing and packaging and just over 5,000 square feet for brewing. Site improvements associated will be parking, underground utilities, and subsurface stormwater management area. And the 3 additions will comprise 8.7% of the existing 632,000 square foot facility. Staff recommends that the board determine that these projects are not a regional impact as they do not meet the criteria for that.
Thank you for the explanation, Jillian. Is it appropriate to vote on them together, or should they be voted separately?
I would prefer separately, if that's all right.
Let's take up the Button Homes application, please. What's the will of the board?
I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that this is not does not require. It meets the criteria for not doing anything as far as regional impact.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion? Second by Mr. Disco. Any discussion? No. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 5-0-0 for that one. Let's take up the Anheuser-Busch application.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask questions on that one. I mean, we're suffering slightly that we haven't seen the plans, but from my understanding of the criteria, it's going to be, the development may well be close to the Nashua municipal border. It is also near the waterway that divides this town from Litchfield across the water. I'm at a loss to understand how we can agree that it does not have a regional impact.
Well, let's look at the criteria. The first one is the proposed development is directly adjacent to a municipal boundary. I guess the river could be a municipal boundary.
It is.
Is the proposed development located within 1,000 feet of an aquifer and there will be a large water withdrawal? That one doesn't apply. Is the proposed development creating a new road or a point of access between the municipalities? No, it doesn't. Is the project a proposed non-residential development that will generate 500 or more vehicle trips per day into an adjacent community? Is the proposed development of 100 or more residential dwelling units? Is the proposed development anticipated to have emissions such as light, noise, smoke, odors, or particles that may impact the neighboring community? So the first one, whether it's adjacent to a municipal boundary, is the one that could potentially fit. It seems that I remember a discussion with Tim that the river doesn't apply as a municipal boundary in that regard. Is that correct or no?
I think it does, but I think our view of the criteria is that even if one might apply, if the majority of the others don't apply, then it doesn't meet all of the criteria or enough of the criteria to make it a regional impact.
Okay, so the criteria are considerations to take, but not necessarily controlling any one individual. Okay. Nelson, your thought?
I would kind of disagree. Excuse me. Mr. Chairman, I would kind of disagree with that interpretation of this. It seems to me that if it is adjacent to a municipal boundary, by the way we've written this and adopted these rules, that makes it of regional impact, just the way we've written it. Now, if there were exceptions or other ways around, we should say so in here. And the other thing is, I don't know personally whether or not there's any additional emissions associated with this. I don't know much about this proposal. We haven't seen it. And so I'm not going to vote to not call it regional impact. I would vote that it would be a regional impact until I hear otherwise.
The proposal is talking about 50,000 square feet of warehousing and packaging for brewing. I'm not sure how that gets to having the possibility of emissions. But
And, Mr. Chairman, and 5,100 square feet for brewing. Brewing is odours.
it's not an environmental emissions. Not the way they're regulated now. I mean, we welcome that. But either way, vote your conscience, whichever way you want to do it. Tom?
I would make a motion to count it as a region, as not a regional impact.
Is there a second for that motion? I'll second it for the point of discussion.
I feel that the wording says adjacent to, and if you notice on the picture there, the property is not actually adjacent to the river. It's close to it, but there is buffer land in between. Now, I realize we're picking straws there, but I feel like the river makes a boundary that keeps it very difficult for the town of Litchfield to say that they're being impacted by something that's going on the other side of the river, except potentially by visual impact. And I don't believe that the addition here to the 8.7% increase in the square footage of the facility there is going to be a visual change to anybody on the Litchfield side of the river. I don't believe there's going to be emissions that are appreciable or traffic that's going to be noticeably different between Litchfield and Merrimack, and certainly not between Nashua and Merrimack. So I don't see any reason to believe that there's a regional impact by this change.
The river is a big dividing line.
It is a very big dividing
I
line.
think it's a big dividing line too as well. I want to comment on Nelson's view of the criteria. The way that they're written here is that these are general criteria considered by the staff in making a recommendation. These are not sort of absolute black and whites that if you check off one of these, you got to be a regional impact. In my view, thinking of regional impact in the sort of the common sense viewpoint, I don't see any way that this proposal has an effect or an impact on our neighbors. These criteria sort of put some meat on those bones, but I just can't think of now. On the other side of the coin, if we decided it was a regional impact, all it does is write a letter to the planning board in Litchfield and say, you know, have a look at it if you care.
They'll then be notified as if they were in a butter.
Yeah, it's not necessarily rocket science. However, we do tend to start setting precedents in terms of what our neighbors are expecting in terms of notice, and you know that can have an effect on the decision. My view is that I would support the motion to determine that it's not of regional impact. Anyone else want to speak to it before we?
Mr. Chairman, I personally would like to suggest that we table this item until we actually can see the plans, because it's very difficult for us to make decisions. I'm not doubting what the staff genuinely think it isn't, but they've seen the plans, we haven't. I'm not sure how we can really make a final and firm decision until we know what's actually going on.
It's not intended to be a final and firm decision, and it actually kind of has to occur this way because once we have plans, it's under review. It's too late to give notice to the next town over.
Oh. Okay, I hear that.
So it's intended to be a preliminary, and you know, if in that regard, maybe the choice ought to be to err on the side of giving some notice. But either way, vote how you intend to vote. I think in the end of the day, it's not the most earth-shattering decision.
No,
one way
you're
or
quite right. Isn't it?
I think the river is wide enough that determines that we don't have a regional impact.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? Remember a week or two ago, we got notice of the proposal at the Camp Young Judea on Camp Road because it existed kind of on the the property actually straddles the line between us and Amherst. And they provided us notice because of that. But at the end of the day, I think that we sort of looking at that one, even at a staff level, and saying, you know, tennis courts really have no impact. This is obviously not a tennis court. It's bigger than that. But I don't know if the regional impact scheme of things is meant to put people on notice of everything that comes along that's of this scope or scale. Anyway, if there's no other discussion, the motion is to determine that it's not of regional impact. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yep.
That is 3-2 to determine that it's not a reasonable impact, with Mr. Disco and Mr. Milnes voting opposed. So the motion carries. That brings us to, before we leave the Planning and Zoning Administrator's report, are there any questions for staff? Members of the board? I'll offer up as a note on Jillian's mention of the potential appointment of a new planning board member at the town council meeting on Thursday. I also received an email today of yet another person interested in being interviewed for a position on our board. If that comes forward and goes through, then I don't know whether that person's interested in being an alternate or full-time member, but that would leave us with only one vacancy after that as either a full-time or part-time. Not part-time, alternate. Yes. Yeah, I think so. The gentleman's qualifications, I don't want to disclose his identity until it sort of develops a little further, but he seems to be a reasonably good person to suspect might be a good member of the board. With that, item 3 on our agenda is Button Homes LLC as the applicant and Donna Kazmierczak as the owner, and this is review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a minor subdivision of one lot into 2 single-family residential lots located at 71 Bedford Road in the R Residential and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 6D, lot 90. Jillian, is there anything that we need to know while the applicant's setting up?
Not really. That's a pretty minor subdivision, straightforward, 2.6 acre parcel as was described before. I think there's some clarification needed on whether some structures will be removed or not, but otherwise I'll let Ray explain it.
Thank you. Don't let me rush you, as long as it takes you to get ready to go, and then sign in and introduce yourself. Can you guys see that easel from where you are, or should we move it forward a little bit? Tom?
I can't see
Pull,
it.
pull it this way.
Yeah, pull it,
A tad
pull it
bit.
forward a couple of feet and turn it a little bit. There you go. Is that okay, Tom? That
Yeah.
work? Okay, good. Thank you. No, they never. The screen behind my head. I'm supposed to watch that. I don't know.
Turn your
Is
light.
your mic on?
Touch the button. Make that.
Bright,
Well,
bright.
make
It
it
gets even
brighter.
brighter.
There you go.
Technology
There's
is
green
wonderful.
and there's green.
There's green.
On and more on.
Evening, my name is Raymond Shea from Sanford Survey, and this is a proposed subdivision of a piece of land located on the, I guess, the northeast side of Bedford Road, 71 Bedford Road. It's approximately 2.5 acres. There's an existing house, garage, and another structure. The proposal is to subdivide the property into 2 lots. The existing house, which is on the westerly side of the property, would remain with just under an acre of land, 40,000 square feet, and about 180 feet of frontage. The new parcel or vacant parcel, which would be on the east side of the lot, would retain about 1.6 acres and has about 341 feet of frontage. The existing house is currently serviced by municipal sewer and water, which is also runs along Bedford Road. There is also a municipal sewer line which runs north-south just east of the property on the abutting property, which is church property. In discussions with Public Works, they felt it would be reasonable to tie into that line a little easier, a little closer to the buildable area. We have reached out to the church in discussions with easements, and I think probably someone may be here from the church tonight. So that is kind of an outstanding issue. However, we still have the availability to go out to the street and tie in, but it's just because of the distance back from the road and the depths of the sewer in those areas, it would probably be easier to tie in into that interceptor on the east side of the property.
Can you show us on the map
Yeah,
where that is?
absolutely.
Take
Do I
the
need a
mic, please,
sir?
with you.
Absolutely. This is the proposed lot line, the existing house. This would be the new lot. The sewer and water is in Bedford Road. This line here is the sewer line that goes cross country. It actually comes down the street and up, or down and up. I'm not sure which direction it flows, but this is it where it takes a turn and goes up through the church property. I believe it goes to the school, which is out back. And there are several manholes along the way. We're proposing a driveway to come in, and the buildable area for the new lot would be back in this area, and there's a manhole right there. As you see, there's an existing 20-foot wide easement. The town has an easement, 10 feet each side of the sewer line. Easement doesn't quite make it to our property line, so there's about a 20-foot strip of land that we would need an easement from the church to get to that manhole. So that's the proposed location of the easement, and the purpose for it would just make things easier for future construction and tying into the sewer. The water would still come from the street up along where the proposed driveway is to the building site.
So have you talked to the church?
The proposed owners have spoken to the church, and they seem receptive. However, we haven't had any further communication.
What happens to your plan if it turns out that they won't give you an easement?
Then we would tie into the street.
Okay.
Is there a reason, if you're gonna tie in for the water, that you're not gonna tie into the sewer?
Well, the sewer's a lot deeper.
I would think it would be in the same line, though.
Well, you got to keep them separated, and the water is a lot shallower. The
Okay.
sewer's about 15 feet deep, so once you get out there, you've got quite a drop to the sewer, whereas the water, it's easier to tie into. And to tie into this
But you're digging a
interceptor.
trench,
Pardon?
but you're digging a trench.
I'm not saying it's impossible.
Okay.
I'm just saying, that distance, to run the
Okay.
sewer line that far.
Okay.
Again,
Okay.
that's why it would be great to get this easement,
I got it.
but it's not 100% necessary for this project to go forward. And it'd be cheaper.
Okay, please proceed.
Any other-
Is there more of your presentation that you'd
No,
like to make?
that's,
Okay.
that's pretty much it.
On the existing lot, you've got a garage and something marked building. I guess that's a shed.
Correct.
That's within the wetlands buffer. How did this come to be there?
Well, I think they were there before there was a wetland buffer. I guess that's my answer.
How long have they been there?
Many years. I think they definitely predated the house. I could ask the owner who's in the attic how old the house is, but it's pretty old, and I'm quite confident the garage and the shed predate the wetland ordinance.
Okay, is the staff taking a look at that?
Yeah, I believe the house is built in 1960s, so I believe the structure would be about the same.
I gotcha. You were in front of the Conservation Commission
Correct.
earlier this week? Actually, we
yeah.
should probably accept the application is complete before we get into that level of detail.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the application, we should consider the application for review.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Second by Lynn. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 5-0-0 to regard the application as complete and accept it for review. So you were in front of the Conservation Commission. Did you get a chance to see the memo that the chair of the Conservation Commission wrote?
No.
Okay, he sent it to me by email. And give me a second to find it, and I will.
Does you want
Oh,
to borrow my
yes.
copy?
Sure.
Please help yourself to my
I don't
copy.
need to look it up in
Oh.
my email. So this is from Tim Tenhave, who's the chairman of the Conservation Commission, and he sent this Monday, April 6th, yesterday. This evening, the Conservation Commission discussed the application of Button Homes LLC and Donna Kazmierczyk for a minor subdivision at 71 Bedford Road. Earl Sanford of Sanford Surveying and Engineering provided an overview of the site and presented the subdivision. Their recommendations are below. The Commission realizes it's difficult to put restrictions on residents of two proposed parcels, but would like to encourage them to not use salt or de-icing compounds on their driveways given the proximity of the wetlands on the parcel and those abutting. Their second recommendation, the commission recommends the back shed be removed, given its condition and location within the wetland buffer. The commission further recommends that if the current garage is not removed from the wetland buffer, that the residents and users of that garage not store fertilizers, herbicides, or other chemicals in that garage. This is again due to the garage's location and the location of the wetlands, both on the abutting parcels. What's this issue with the condition of the shed? Is it in bad shape or in need of
No,
replacement?
they've agreed to remove the shed.
Okay, so the applicant wants to
Yeah,
remove it.
right.
And then I guess the intent is not to remove the garage.
Not commit to, but they probably will remove it.
Now, part of something that I was reading was saying that all of these buildings were going to be removed at some point.
That was, yeah, there was discussions to possibly build a new house, and I think that is probably what's gonna happen, but someone may come along and see this nice, cute little old cape and wanna scoop it right up. And if that's the case, then they, well, I like cute little nice old capes. But to be honest, they'll probably all three come down, but I guess they don't want to commit to take the house down unless you know they get to the point where they build the other house and they want to build this house and haven't sold the lot.
Okay. Now, for our planning board purposes, I guess what I'm watching out for is the notion that when they go to rebuild those houses or rebuild a house, if they ever decide to do that, would the applicant be inclined to suggest that that garage is a pre-existing non-conforming use that they're allowed to continue, or would they build their garage outside the wetlands buffer going forward
I would say if they built a new house, they'd build a new garage.
in the right place?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
The recommendations from the Conservation Commission are only recommendations to us, but it's always worthy of discussion.
Sure.
And their issue with the salt and de-icing is that more and more across town we're getting salt in the wells. Is that something that the applicant's willing to consider?
Yes.
Not using
Yes.
salt or
Yeah.
de-icing?
Sure.
Okay. Are there other comments or questions from members of the board?
I would like to look at what you're doing, what the second house is going to be. You first of all answered my question because I wasn't sure where it was going to go, which I guess you're putting it right at the back,
Correct.
with a very long driveway. Well, a reasonably long
Sure.
driveway.
Sure. Longer than the other one. Yeah.
Long driveway by my.
This winter, that's a long
You
Well, I
won't be
have
able-
a 600-foot driveway,
you
so
won't-
to me,
the school bus driver won't be able to see the parents up from the
Correct.
road.
Yeah.
Have you got that much space up at the back?
there's a lot of space. Yeah. It's.
I mean, you're going to have to knock down quite a bit of treeing to get there.
Actually, there's a. If I
There's a
may,
clearing out
may approach the board.
Yeah.
That board.
Sure.
Yes.
There's actually room.
I suppose there is room. Yeah.
There's actually
It's real close to the school.
this was the old original lot line. If you go back in history, and there's a tree line there, but out back it's like there's a clearing.
It's open.
So if you blow through that little bunch of trees there, there's not a lot of trees to cut. There's a little opening if you look at the aerial maps. And there's an area that's probably 100 by 40 of big rectangles. There's more room back there than you're not going to have sprawling decks and Olympic-sized pools attached to this, but there's definitely room to build a substantial size house. Whereas up front, you really have no room.
You've got no
You
room
really-
at the front.
You
no.
really need to get back along this long driveway.
The other thing, there's a comment in the planning staff that the problem is about the site distances. They're saying that your site distances on the plan should be a minimum of 275. You're actually only showing 200 in
Right.
both directions.
There's probably 500 feet in both directions. When I met with staff, I don't remember what we looked at, but I thought we came to the conclusion it was a 200-foot site distance. But 275, 300 is not an issue out here. It's
Okay.
we can amend it on the final plan.
Well,
It's very flat, and we're on the right side of a curve, and you can see
You can see forever.
easily. Yeah, well,
Okay.
almost forever.
so you can amend the plan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Otherwise, the chair-
Other comments or questions? We've got a few visitors here tonight who probably want to weigh in and offer the board some comments. So let's take some public testimony. Are there abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in and offer the board any information? Please come forward. If you could offer them the tables so that they could come and sit. Please come forward, sign in, introduce yourself, and tell us what's on your mind.
It's as fast as I write.
Take your time, there's no rush.
It's the only thing on the agenda tonight. Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
My name is Robert Bragdon. I'm the elder of facilities at Bedford Road Baptist Church and a butter to this property. And this is Peter Lindsay, who is one of our maintains the grounds. Yeah, we're the grounds guys. And while we welcome new neighbors and would miss that sweet little house, we do have a couple of concerns about water management on the property.
Okay. What are they?
The issue is, as an abutter, there is a drainage stream to the east of this property which runs across our property. It goes under our driveway through twin culverts. This is a drainage for the Kathy Road.
Would you pick up the mic?
Oh.
And show us
Oh,
where that
certainly.
is.
Show us, point as you're talking.
So your property is east of theirs.
Yeah, to the right.
Bedford Road Baptist Church is located right over here. The drainage is for the Kathy Road develop. I call it the Kathy Road development. There's 20 or so houses up in here in a very steep piece of land. That water drains down just to the southerly side of our church, comes under our driveway, which is approximately up through here, comes across just south of one of the manholes in this easement. Now, as it goes into this little wooded strip that is between our properties, it drops into a 2-foot culvert. That water is then transported to another stream in this direction.
Where's the culvert?
The culvert that it goes into is, there we go,
Okay.
this one right here. So it cuts across both properties. Now, this culvert was put in by the town of Merrimack many years ago to alleviate a flooding issue from this drainage. Now, this is a very seasonal issue, granted, but when it's wet, it's wet. We know because we've seen part of our front lawn go under this year with the amount of rain that we had. So our concern is in granting this easement as the construction goes through here is the condition of this culvert. If this is affected, then if it collapses, by the way, we've replaced ours in our driveway because it did collapse. And I'm assuming that they were put in at approximately the same time. This is going to give some flooding issues here and for ourselves. So we don't really know if this has been addressed by the architects or not, or with the builders to do this, but we are concerned that by disturbing that area, that we're going to have some water management issues, and they're going to be pretty unpleasant for whoever puts their house there.
Okay, I got you. I guess we'll have to hear from the applicant a little bit, but it's strange that we've got a culvert put in by the town that doesn't sit in an easement.
What's the drainage to the west? Where does it drain to?
Babusick Brook
I believe
eventually.
it ultimately goes into Babusick Brook.
Okay.
There's a water, when you go towards Lions Road where all the ball fields are, it goes under Pearson Road, I believe, and ultimately it goes into Babusick Brook. As Bob had said, it does drain quite a bit of an area up towards the Cabot Road, Kathy Street. It's wet about 6 months of the year.
Where does that culvert road end?
I believe it, once
I
it.
mean, I see where it ends on your property, but
Well, I believe it
Where
goes
does it
back into an
eventually
open
end?
stream near the, at the opposite end of the property. I believe it goes back into the open again. So it's about, maybe about 200 feet that it goes underneath the,
does it just stop as an open culvert?
it just
Yes.
goes back into an
I don't
open
know where the
culvert, I
culvert is,
believe.
but you can see Babusick Brook is kind of right through there.
Yeah, I know.
So we gotta get
Okay.
under there.
And we're certainly concerned about, especially if the church does grant the sewer easement, it would be crossing over that piece of
Yep.
pipe, if there's any damage to that pipe. And as Bob related, that the church has already had, about 5 years ago, had to replace. The stain was the same type of corrugated steel that, you know,
I think we
causes a
could,
lot of problems right now, so we've had to replace ours. We don't know what condition it's in. Even if it's in good condition today, 5 years from now, it may not be in good condition. So
okay.
that's, you know, the main concern.
It's worthwhile to look into the history. I mean, it's easy enough for the planning board to put a condition on the applicant that they've gotta respect what's there, but, if it's falling apart as it is, and it's not been built in an easement where somebody's rights have been delineated, you could have a right big mess even without their subdivision, because I don't know who's responsible for fixing that if it corrodes and falls apart, the way that it's written on here, unless there's background material that just aren't reflected here, and there actually is an easement or something.
It was, from my understanding and talking to some of the older members of the church that were around when the church was originally built in the late 70s, that it was a flooding issue then. And somehow the town was brought into it, and between the three parties, I guess it caused a bit of a flap at the time about the town putting a drainage easement on private property, but it was done anyways to alleviate the issue. And it's been like that ever
From a
since,
practical
so-
standpoint, probably works fine. It's just they didn't quite get the paperwork to catch up.
Right, so that's from my understanding, talking to some of the older members of the church that were present at that time.
Yeah, I don't know what to suggest as a resolution for that. I'd have to sort of wonder from the staff whether, as a part of approving this subdivision, as a planning board, we've got to address a utility that's crossing their property this way, that doesn't have an easement.
We could not find any sort of easement or agreement for the pipe. The only thing that I could suggest is some sort of agreement made between the abutting property owners as a condition of approval, but without an easement or agreement.
Was the town party to that agreement?
No, she's
No, there
suggesting
isn't
that there was
one that we can find.
Oh, so we've got to create one.
Well, if there was an agreement between abutting property owners that's saying, you know, we've got this pipe and you're allowed to use it, that's what an easement is. It just gets recorded after you make it into an agreement. But whether they need to accomplish that as a part of this approval because they've got a drainage situation, I don't know.
But there's no reason why, with this subdivision, we can't ignore that and just have them required to be tied into the Bedford Road.
Well,
Well,
Is that
perhaps,
correct?
although,
That's, no, actually, we'd be better off tying into the place he suggested. Then you don't cross this at all with your sewer
well,
pipe.
but the
So-
water's still gonna cross there, so they're still gonna disturb that area
For the water pipe,
for the water pipe.
yes, but
and
the
the
water
driveway's going to
pipe
go over the top of this culvert.
disruption would be significantly less, from what I hear, than a sewer disruption. If he had to dig a ditch for the sewer, if he had to go through there, he's
Well,
putting,
the sewer doesn't have to be that deep until it gets towards the street. I mean, it can be a lot shallower, but even still, you're gonna interfere with that pipe. You're gonna have to break through it. I don't think
Not
they're gonna dig
necess-
under it.
yeah,
Tunnel under it?
yeah, I would think. But,
Hang on one second. You got to wait for your turn to get to a microphone for
Yeah.
that.
We need a mic.
Sorry. We'll get you in a second.
yeah.
I don't mean to cut you off.
Okay, well, this kind of thing happened in the past, of putting drainage pipes across private property with the agreement, verbal agreement of the owners at the time, but with no easement recorded. And I would think that the town, if the town is responsible for this pipe, and I believe the town is, they would want an easement to work in there nowadays. and they would need that to replace the pipe, which is probably gonna be required in some number of years. So,
I agree with that in terms of what the town would want now.
yeah.
I'm wanting some clarification as far as our planning board authority to make that happen as a part of this approval, or how does that work going forward? The other piece of this analysis was that if the owner of the two-lot subdivision, the applicant that's before us now, said, hey, we don't want this pipe on our property anymore, and just plugged it up, they would alter the drainage in the area and open themselves up to liability from their neighbors anyway, so they don't really have the authority to block it up on purpose. But whether they did it by accident as a part of the construction process and weren't particularly quick about fixing it or something like that, I don't know. It's sort of a concern.
Yeah.
Lynn, did you have a comment?
What's the right thing to do here? I mean,
I-
that's the bottom line. What's the right thing to do here?
To get an easement.
Can I
In
interject?
my view.
Please do.
Happy to listen.
We found no record of an easement here. It was our understanding the parties agreed that when the church got built, I believe, this was a way to alleviate some flooding. It was done at the allowance of this property owner, which I think is
When you refer to the parties,
yeah,
define them, please.
the owner of this lot, which
Okay.
is, I believe, the heirs are here. They
Okay,
actually own the
okay.
property now, and the church.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm not sure of the involvement of the town. This is the first I heard the town was
That's
involved.
all right.
But this pipe actually meanders down the line. This is like an opening in the pipe, which kind of pulls up, and then the pipe starts up again and heads on down yonder. So this is
Probably somebody trying to get rid of that wetland problem
this
on your
isn't
property.
the only, yeah. It was to basically drain the church property. The sewer.
Not the church property. It was to drain the
Kathy
Kathy
Road.
Road area.
Well,
It
it's
simply
always
crosses
drained
that
this
property.
way. It was my
Well,
understanding to help alleviate some of the
Immediately,
issues
it's
here.
the
the
church
pipe is-
property, but it's coming from
Right.
Kathy
Right.
Road.
Right. This easement, our proposed easement to the manhole will actually help any further disturbance here because we're taking the sewer out above the pipe. We're not going under the pipe. Water line's more flexible. You can kind of go under and over things as long as you're a certain depth. Sewer line, unless you pump, you've got to
Gravity.
be a certain grade. So in theory, there may be a conflict if we ran the sewer out to here. So it would be it would behoove
Everyone.
the life of this pipe for the sewer line to go into the manhole because that keeps it away from your drainage pipe. And we wouldn't be, and I might be talking out of turn here, totally adverse to swapping easements. So that someday, if this something happens to this pipe, the church can get in and fix it. Because it really benefits the church. It doesn't really benefit our property, because if that back floods, we'll keep that piece of culvert anyway. So, there's some talking we could do there. I think the church is going to benefit as much as we would benefit by swapping easements, which is just an idea. And I don't know if the plan.
I think you're right on the money in the physical sense, in the design sense. I think you're right about putting the sewer in the direction that you want to
Right.
go in. Now, whether you can make an arrangement with your neighbors where they provide you an easement, that gives them the opportunity to bargain with you and
Right.
request that you
Right.
give them an easement for
Right.
the
Yeah.
pipeline. I think overall that makes a lot of sense. I agree with Lynn's question. I think that ultimately if we pursued some advice from the staff or beyond the staff to legal counsel, we would find that we do have the authority and probably the obligation to make an easement arrangement set up to protect this pipe if the town is the one responsible for the pipe. If
Yeah,
it's
at this point,
private
I
property,
don't know if
that'd
the
be a
town
different cat.
would be responsible after all these years. I don't. We'd have to do some research as to the actual physical construction of it.
So he alluded to the fact, excuse me, that the church, if through an easement swap, would assume responsibility for that maintenance of that pipe down the road?
Potentially. I mean, you can put whatever you want into an agreement, but typically when you create an easement, the property that's benefited by the easement has both the right and the obligation to do its maintenance. If this pipe failed today, could you go to these neighbors without the subdivision or anything going on? If the pipe just failed, Could you go to them and say they've got to fix it? I don't think that you could, as it stands today. If they physically blocked it up on purpose, I think that you could go to them and say you've made a mistake. But anyway, I don't want to confuse my day job with my night job and practice law from the behind the table here. So there's a lot of other possibilities that could be worked out in terms of what an agreement calls for. That said, I don't know if the applicant is particularly interested in being financially responsible for maintenance of the pipe, even if they're willing to give an easement for it. It's probably a lot to take on.
I think the pipe benefits the church. If it gets crushed or collapses in this, it's gonna back up the water. The water is not gonna continue flowing downhill.
Yeah. I think that the church's viewpoint, at least from the evidence that they've provided so far, was that although they're the first ones in line for the backup, the purpose of the pipe was to remedy a situation that was created by a different bunch of property and subdivision, which is how the town got involved in it.
But,
And I see someone who was on the board at that time shaking their head up and down.
Well, actually, this precedes any planning board activity in that area, but I was involved with some of the town activities, so I'm somewhat familiar with this kind of thing, not the specifics of this case.
but if the situation exists as it is, and nobody has any additional liability over what exists now, if the applicant is coming in and saying, I want more than what I have now, then I see there's no reason that we shouldn't say, if you want more, then you have to take more responsibility for what's going on in the situation. Does that make sense?
Potentially so, although if this was PSNH's power line, we wouldn't tell the applicant that they're...
That's a public utility, that's different.
Well, yeah, I guess it's a little bit different, but this is not the applicant's benefit for this pipe. I mean, for all they're concerned, they'd rather probably not have it at all.
But if the applicant wanted to rebuild that house, they could do that.
Yep.
With everything that exists now. But if they want to say, we want to make 2 lots, then I think they need to take into consideration the surrounding areas and the topography and the drainage that exists now, and convince us that it makes sense and they're willing to respond to an increased demand over what they have now.
You know, perhaps so, although I'm looking at 500 feet or so of 24-inch corrugated metal pipe buried in a wetland setback. The idea of putting that on a private homeowner to be responsible for when it's not their property that produced the water or caused the need for the drainage is...
We're not putting it on a private homeowner.
put it on these applicants
No,
right here.
we're putting it on someone who wants to have a second lot. We're not putting it on the homeowner. They're
Somebody
fine.
owns the property now, so they're the homeowner.
And they're fine, and we're not requiring them to do anything in addition to what's there now.
No, they don't have to build
They're fine the way
anything.
they are now.
They don't have to build anything, I guess, and perhaps some of this is beyond the planning board in terms of who's responsible for maintenance of an easement if an easement's created, but that's really what it's about, is if this pipe on its own volition collapses 3 years from now and somebody's got to go and replace 500 feet of corrugated metal pipe in a swamp, who's getting the bill for that? Is it the church and the people that are benefiting from it? Is it the town because they're the ones that are actually benefiting from it further up the line? Is it this homeowner upon whose property it is? Can the homeowner upon whose property it is just say, you know what, I don't care about it, leave it?
And that's fine the way it is.
Okay.
But what we're being asked is to create a subdivision, and if there's an issue there, I think it's up to us to resolve any issues that may potentially be there in order to allow them to do a subdivision.
So I'd like to have a better understanding of what the real problem is. You said that without that pipe, or before that pipe went in, there was flooding at the church. Is there,
Actually, on the abutting property,
which abutting property?
on this property that we're looking at, right about where that north arrow is, pardon me, is a low spot for us. One of the wettest spots that we have, and that will not dry out well into the early summer days. And that's indicative of where the water table sits, and when if that stream doesn't fully drain, we won't have a problem, because we've got a big front lawn it'll go out on. The church is up on an elevated piece of land, we're on a slab. But that piece of property, that back portion, is what is going to flood. And that's what that culvert was put in to alleviate, was to get that flooding out of that general area.
Now that, when you look at the aerial photograph, the tree line, which is roughly behind the culvert, is about even with your building. And so it's not really getting to that back property. It's kind of picking up right off the side of the school building. So how does the backyard, the church's backyard water end up getting into that culvert? Is it?
If you're looking at the aerial photo, if you look on the southern side of the church, depending on what time of year it was taken, you'll see it looks like a small stream running parallel to the church.
Yes.
That's we call it the drainage ditch, stream, whatever, depending on what time of the year you're looking at it. That goes over onto the property line, and that's where it goes into the culvert.
Okay, and that stream goes all the way across the church's property from the property next to it
Yes.
and on down. Is that I guess you wouldn't really know whether that's natural or man-made.
If you look at even the town's GIS map system, it shows a stream on there paralleling Bedford Road until it hits Cathy Street, then it kind of works its way uphill towards Cabot Road. So, I mean, it's even identified on the town maps as being there.
It's an interesting one.
So I guess what I was getting at was wondering if that pipe wasn't there, what happens realistically? And I'm not sure I clearly understand. You're saying that the back part of the church property would flood. The property in question would flood as well?
In our recent wet weather,
Yeah.
it's a little bit much for that particular stream to drain, and we were starting to get water from the stream towards the Bedford Road side, because it just gets deeper. The issue was that without the culvert, the secondary area of flooding would have been onto the property, which is towards the rear of the proposed subdivision, of the subdivided parcel.
Not towards the orange portion.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, you're
No,
saying that the
no,
wetland
more-
area doesn't get wet? I mean, I
No,
think-
well, the house is actually up on a slight elevation.
I'm not worried about.
Yeah, but see the
Yeah.
orange that's going through
Right.
it delineating wetland area?
Right, it's more towards that well, that's why it's a wetland area. It's
Well, I
very
understand,
low.
but
It's,
you keep suggesting it goes to the back of where that culvert is, and the wetlands is more to the front, to the west of.
There's an orange line
Mhm.
going from southwest
Microphone. You could
to,
you show it to me? I'm colorblind. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
all right.
Sorry about that.
I'm trying to look intelligent and I can't.
No, that's,
Oh, that thing.
There's an orange line here.
Lynn, you still need a microphone.
thank you.
That'll be the day.
Wow.
There's an orange line here going this way. That's wetland. Now, what I think I'm hearing you say is the flooding will occur in this area?
Well, it'll certainly occur where the culvert begins, because it was put there for a reason. But
I understand that.
knowing how the lay of the land is,
But if the house is here, are you suggesting that this is going to flood here?
it gets wet now.
It's going to go, and so your engineer is saying it's going to go from here this way. So it's going to go this way, not this way.
I won't pretend to argue with an engineer.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, we got plenty of engineers over here, though. Okay, I understand.
I guess my point is
Electrical
the
may not
flooding
help,
isn't necessarily going to affect us. We've got plenty of room for it to flood out in our front lawn, but the flooding is going to be on the adjoining property, on the applicant's property.
Yeah, it does help a little bit. Okay.
But, okay, I hear what you're saying, and you're being very kind and pointing it out to the applicant that he may get a flood unless he does something. What is your concern? Are you saying that as long as somebody does something about it, and you don't even care if it floods your front lawn, so what's your worry?
We always care, because
All right.
water and Merrimack never seem to fit well together.
We've never normally got enough of the damn stuff.
Horseshoe Pond would disagree. I think our concern is, of course, general flooding anyways. This culvert was put in there to handle this drainage.
Gotcha.
And if that's not handled, then, over the years, the land has shifted, changed. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to say I could show you exactly where it's going to flood. It's going to flood somewhere between
Yeah.
the applicant's property and our property.
I think the culvert was designed to pull the water off of their property and put it into Babusick Brook, so that they're not gonna have a huge issue. And the question will be is, if we allow this subdivision, what happens with that culvert? And how do we manage that? And if it's there to drain their property, then do we require something for the subdivision to manage this?
To simplify sort of my view on the culvert, it appears to pick up and begin off of the property that the applicant owns. It starts on essentially the church's property and conveys water darn near all the way across the applicant's property. So it's picking up water that isn't on the applicant's property and conveying it almost all the way through. With that function, it certainly needs to be sitting in an easement. It's benefiting a neighboring parcel by going over this one. Question is, whose easement is it? And that's a question I don't know that we've heard anything close to enough information to answer. But I think that it ultimately is going back into the 70s to figure out who built this thing, and if it was the town that built it. I don't know if that makes the town responsible for it. I don't want to make the town. I don't want to make any decisions about what the town's responsible for, because that's not what planning boards do.
I think it's
But-
abutting properties that are responsible for it, and for them to decide who it benefits and
Yep.
who's responsible.
I'm not sure we've got to resolve that question in order to consider this application. I think that to state that there needs to be an easement to describe the location of this culvert, and that as all easements, the language has to be approved by the town's legal counsel.
I'll go with that.
Let Matt sort it out.
I have one further question that comes to mind in this. Was there a soils, a wetland boundary determination here by a soil scientist?
Yes, what you see in beige is the wetland delineated by a wetland scientist.
Okay, and that was done when?
Orange beige, last fall,
Okay, all right. So
before it snowed.
I just wanted to know where we were with that.
Is your wetland scientist going to stamp your plan, or did they, and I'm not seeing it?
I think he did on the original plan. It's Earl Sanford. He's a wetland scientist as well as surveyor.
Okay, I got you. Is there anything else that you two gentlemen want to offer for us? We're still sort of open to public testimony.
I think we're good.
Thank you so
very
much
for your
for the
time.
presentation.
Yeah.
Are there any other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? Going once, going twice? Okay.
Could we ask the applicant, since his knowledge of this pipe and his understanding of this situation in here,
Could
just to
shed some
get
light.
his view of it? We've heard from the church, but we didn't hear really from the.
No,
from the
I agree
owner.
with you with that. But if there are no other abutters
Yeah.
who wish to testify, let's close the public hearing. Invite the applicant to come back forward.
The owner is an heir of the property.
Okay.
No, Donna? Donna, does she have any, would she like to?
Sure. Well,
This-
public
this-
hearing will be back open again. Come on forward.
This is Brian Button. He's one of the proposed owners of the property.
Not an owner.
Not an owner yet.
Okay.
Proposed owner.
Please sign in. Take your time. I apologize for putting you and the family through this. This two-lot subdivision usually isn't so complicated, but
Nah, I'm not here to make waves or anything like that. I just want to express my opinion.
Make sure the mic is on.
All right, my name's Brian Button, and I'm going to be the future purchaser of this property.
yeah, come a little closer to the microphone. There we
And
go.
so we do have that culvert on the property, and my only issue is that the back parcel is not going to flood if that culvert is pulled out. If that culvert gets pulled out, the water where
Collapses.
collapses, the water will eventually find its way down through that orange strip. But the problem is for the church, which we could remedy if we had to, is they built, the church is low, and then they built up a line. So there's probably a 20-foot line going along the property that's higher than the church and higher than the property that's there. So that forces the water to go in to that culvert. So if you just remove that hill, the water would seek its natural level and go down that wetland that's there now.
I suspect that whoever put the
So the
bit of a
reason,
berm there and the pipe there didn't want it to do that. That's why you got a pipe and berm.
so everything was just redesigned and engineered so the water would flow into that culvert.
Yeah.
What's your solution to this?
I mean, I'd be willing to grant an easement for the church to come in and, repair that pipe if it needs to be repaired.
Anywhere across those two property lines?
Yeah. So each lot would end up having an easement on it for the church. I mean,
I wonder if there could be
because
a,
because the way the lot is now, I mean, somebody could buy that piece of property and say, I don't want the culvert there anymore, and pull it out.
Correct.
And then that's not fair to the church.
they may not be able to do that because if you back up water flow from your property back onto somebody else's, that's going to be your problem. too.
Right, but what you could do is, like I said, you could take that swale that they built and take that down.
Oh
and
yeah,
the water would flow
absolutely. As long as the
through,
water
it's-
flow is managed some other way, and I don't know if you couldn't make that culvert 30 feet long and get right into the tip of that wetland and drain that property that way. Of course, DES probably would disagree with my plan, but
Yeah, see, I don't know.
they're little sticklers about that silliness. So.
And the property from an aerial photograph doesn't really look like there's wetlands there. So I mean, maybe there's a swale or something that,
It looks like a dry field when you look at the.
yeah, I mean,
There is a swale down there.
Yeah.
There definitely is a swale.
Yeah, it's a mowed field, maintained field. It just has a wetland characteristics because there's a little low point. So, but it's not your traditional valuable wetland.
Right here, this is where they've done something here with it to keep the land higher, so the water's forced to go into that culvert.
They, you
No,
mean the church.
when you say they, I know
Okay,
that
the
you're
church
suggesting
is
the church,
here.
but it could have been the town or whoever put in the
Whoever
sewer
put
pipe.
that
or-
pipe in, they knew what they were doing. They brought the land up to force the water to go through this culvert.
So somebody did.
Somebody did it, yeah. And then the culvert comes out here, comes to an end, and then it's washed out here, and then it restarts again. And I think it goes all the way to Babuzik Brook
Yeah, it's not much further
underground.
to
I
get
mean,
to the
it's
brook from there.
it's
It's there.
so.
Yeah, it's not much. It's a couple of lots further, and then you're at not even a lot, couple lots, one lot, one more lot. Is there anything else that you want to offer for
That's it.
testimony?
I just wanted to babble.
Any questions?
You know, I just,
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
yeah.
for your testimony.
Thank you.
yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing again. Now come on forward back to the table here.
Who owns the culvert now?
That's why we don't do property transactions like this anymore. This is a big stinking mess.
Well, but who owns it?
Without any documentation and no easement, it belongs to the applicant, the Button Home
Yeah, it's on
LLC
the
and Donna
applicant's
Kazmierczuk.
property, you know.
All right, so they own it.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
And they'll continue to own it
We
even
don't
if there's
have
an
to do
easement
anything
on
with
it.
We don't have to do anything with it, but we own it.
Is the culvert on their property or just the pipe?
The very beginning is actually on the church.
Church
property.
property,
The
but
first
they own the
first
pipe.
5 feet or so, yeah.
The opening
Yeah.
to the pipe, the culvert?
Right,
or
the
whatever.
inlet.
The inlet, okay.
Correct.
Okay. Separate from this issue with the water pipe, are there any other questions for the applicant? Any other situations anyone wants to discuss? I'm satisfied with the rest of the proposal and the way that you have it laid out. I hope that you're able to arrange with the applicant to have an easement. I think that the board, as it goes forward, I would advocate for the board to impose a condition that an easement be created for that pipe, and that it be created with language that is satisfactory to the town's legal counsel.
An easement for who?
I think that's what Matt would sort out is for the town's legal counsel, and it may ultimately be an easement that has two potential beneficiaries, both the church property and either the town or somebody else could be named.
I think something could be worked out.
But it's owned by, or belongs to the owner now, correct?
Yeah.
Pipe belongs to the owner on whose property it crosses.
It'll always belong
Right,
to the owner,
right.
easement or not.
So I don't see where the church needs an easement for this pipe.
Because if they ever want to repair it, they need a right to be able to go in there and do it. And if the town wants to go and repair it, they need a right to go in there and do it.
Okay,
If something benefited me, I'd want the ability to take care of it.
Yeah, that's the way the law works. If it was a driveway across somebody else's land that benefits you, you gotta take care of it. That's actually, Supreme Court just decided that earlier this week in a case. But in terms of what we have to do, we don't have to sort that out. I think that we can leave that to legal counsel to decide what the right situation is based on the history and what was originally done.
so does building an additional dwelling affect this drainage at all?
No.
In a
Well-
limited sense,
A driveway going through there would
Right?
stop or impede sheet flow if that pipe were not there to drain.
and paving over that pipe changes the prospects of what it might take to maintain it in the future. Because if you ever had to replace that piece of it,
If there's an easement, it'd be written that the driveway would have to be, removed and repaired.
Okay.
But if that driveway changes the flow of water, I guess that's not water that's on their property, it's water that's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah, the driveway would be at grade. It's very flat out there, so there's really no big grade changes to construct the driveway. So I would anticipate it to be at grade.
So I noticed in the staff memo that you've asked for a waiver of the sidewalk requirement, and the staff suggested that we can either waive it or, as a minor subdivision, determine that it's simply not necessary. What's the will of the board with respect to sidewalks?
Mr. Chairman, let's be strict and honest. I would like to make a motion that we grant the waiver from the sidewalk on the basis that to provide that strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver is not contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulations and the circumstances of the area.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Disco. Any discussion? All in favor of granting the sidewalk waiver, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 5-0-0 to grant the sidewalk waiver. That's all the waivers that the applicant has requested. Is the board got in a position where it's ready to take final action, and if so, what's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant conditional final approval to the application with the conditions as specified in the memo from Gillian Harris, together with formally documenting that the applicant in their presentation today said that the shed would be removed now, the garage can stay a bit longer if it wants, but that the shed should go, and that the applicant needs to, in conjunction with whoever, and I'm thinking of the town's legal counsel, produce an easement to cover the church's use of that culvert, or whatever you would like to call it.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Disco. Does that include all the things that we discussed? I know
There's
that the
one
Conservation
more.
Commission talked about de-icing and.
There was one more that Alistair missed, and that is this site distance correction.
Oh, sorry, that should be on the plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
so add that in to,
Now, that's already in the
It's
staff's
already-
memo, which Alistair
Oh, okay.
incorporated. That was
Yeah.
4D.
Site distance is in as a condition, as well as the garage and the shed were addressed. The applicant shall obtain a variance if they're to remain, and if not, they need to be removed prior to issuance of any building permits for the two lots.
Okay, so that's in number 3.
Or
That's in number
two
3.
lots or just the one lot?
For the two lots.
No, I don't believe that's what you asked for.
Well, if they go to the ZBA, they don't need to do that.
Yeah, and
But I want the shed knocked down anyway.
I want the garage out as well.
I think
This
that
is our shot at putting things in compliance. I want it gone.
I don't disagree, although the applicant's always got the authority to go to the zoning board and ask for a variance. Even
that's fine,
no matter what conditions we impose.
But I would impose that condition.
Yeah, I think what the staff is suggesting is that the applicant needs to go to the zoning board if they intend to keep those structures, otherwise they both have to go.
Yep.
As the memo's written, is that
That's
correct,
as
Gillian?
the
And I'm
memo
fine
says.
with that.
That's correct.
that's
Okay.
good,
Yep.
that's good.
Okay, so, what were we adding any conditions to the motion in the second?
correction of the plan to show the site distances.
It's already
which is
here,
there,
so we don't
which
do
is
that.
there. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, you're right.
Okay. Did the Conservation Commission ask for de-icing, and did you agree to de-icing?
we agreed to it.
No de-icing, okay. So let's add that as a condition?
Yep.
The de-icing is already on there?
Forthcoming comments from the Conservation Commission was on the memo, so
Yep.
we hadn't received them yet.
Okay. I got you. So we require no changes to our motion and our second. Any other discussion? All in favor of granting the motion for final approval, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 5-0-0 for approval. Thank you for the
Thank you
presentation.
very much, thank you for your time.
There
Sorry
was
for
one
making you work
change
so hard
from,
for it.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman,
I
there is
earned
a
my
change
money.
from the staff memo in that we've added this easement requirement.
We
now.
definitely have added the easement requirement,
Yeah.
but I mean, that was in the original motion.
Oh, okay.
Jillian, just a question for my own benefit. I know that the applicant has named the condominium owners and it looks like a homeowners association in every single lot in them. That seems to be more than we usually require of an applicant. Did they do that voluntarily, or?
I believe that's been our practice, depending
With-
on who owns.
With condominiums, we've
Owns it.
required the notice to the association. With homeowners associations or those kinds of communities, there's always been some kind of a,
I would have to look into the
We were
details
unable,
of
the
the
town
ownership.
was unable to find association for either condominium.
Yeah.
So we were forced to notify 70 people, which thankfully, they didn't show up tonight.
well, you know, a lot of people don't.
But, you know, we don't have a problem. If we have to do it, we have to do it. It was a few extra dollars. It was a few extra dollars, but it would have been nice if there were associations that we could have notified, just
This actually works a little bit better in practice for the people who are actually living there, because the association never tells the people living there that they
that's
got
true.
notice.
That's true.
So it ends up being deficient.
Right.
But that's why it came to my attention, because I remember seeing some of these where we noticed an association, and then the people who live there find out through the grapevine
Right.
and come here screaming about why didn't they get notice.
That's true.
And
If
that's
there
why I
is an
wanted to know why we did
association,
different.
that
Yeah.
that is the way that we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
There just happen to be a lot of people in this condominium.
Yeah, and you're lucky it's not a bigger association. Yeah, we definitely got bigger condos and bigger associations than that. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jillian, for the explanation of that. That brings us to item 4 on our agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern. I do not have any discussion or other items of concern. Anybody? Going once, twice? That brings us to approval of the minutes of March 17th, 2015. What's the will of the board with respect to those minutes?
I move we approve, and
do it with a microphone on.
I move we approve as printed.
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to approve and second to approve as printed. Any discussion?
Yeah, one,
Had to be. Let's
sorry
go.
about this, sorry about this. Page 4, item 6, line 26.
Folks,
Please take the discussion outside, please. Thank you.
Okay, page 4, item 6, line 26.
Okay.
Where we're talking about the pipe in Penachuk, that they were gonna put in this short-circuit pipe now that they were adding. And it says here, it is proposed to mix all the water by pumping it from the Bowers and Harris reservoirs north to the Concord Street treatment plant. Well, there's no pumping of the pond water involved. This, it was intended that the water from those two reservoirs would continue to go to the treatment plant, but this new pipe was going to go to the treatment plant as well. And this just was confusing when I read it. It said, is proposed to mix all the water by pumping it from the Bowers and Harris reservoirs north,
How would
which,
you reword it?
Well, first of all, it's going south, but
yeah,
How
And
would you reword?
well, okay, I can reword it in a minute here. I would even take that sentence right out of there.
So,
Yeah,
take out from it is proposed down to treatment plant?
Lynn, you got a microphone problem.
Yeah, proposed, it is proposed,
Eliminate the
Let me see.
majority of those two lines.
yeah,
So from it is proposed to the period.
yeah,
Just take out this sentence.
that works. Take out that sentence, and I think we're in.
And then
pretty
we're good?
decent- Yeah,
Any
yeah.
other comments on the minutes of
that'll work.
March
Thanks.
17th? All in favor of approving it with the amendment from Nelson, say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 5-0-0 to approve the minutes. Brings us to item 6,
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adjourn.
seconded by
Second.
Councillor Koenig. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? We are adjourned. Don't forget to turn your microphones off. Items of concern.